Thank you, everyone. Here, it's always an honor to be able to present, and thank you for taking interest in what we're doing here. And it was nice to my journey has been one of always learning, and so I also like to share what we do. So we are at Three Forks, Montana, a couple hours south of Great Falls. Our family was so we're a family farm. My wife Carrie and my son Luke just came back on the farm a year ago, and our daughters Julia, Emma, and Solange. So I just wanted to actually kind of just quickly go through a bit of my journey and what's made it where I am today. We're always made by our experiences. And so I grew up, in France, south of Paris. That's where I was born and grew up. That's the family farm in France. My parents grew 500 acres of wheat, corn, canola, and some specialty crops like onions for seed and potatoes for the farmers market. At the age of 17, I went to Iowa to see what it was like, and I just fell in love with the country. And what struck me at the time, there was on the top of the elevator was Iowa, land of plenty, and it's definitely something that has stuck with me now. In '96, I went on a harvest run and got to see most of the high plains from the seat of a combine, and passed by this farm probably not so far away. And I was about 19, 20 years old. I had little thought I could never imagine that I could farm in Montana. So in the world, sometime life takes you different places, and I was all these have been formative moments. But I wanted to farm, and when I was back in Northwest Iowa, tried to working for farmers. I'd started an import-export parts business, and really wanted to start over there, but the opportunities were really difficult. Like it was just about impossible. So in 2003, my wife is from Alberta, and her parents said, "Why don't you look into Saskatchewan?" And first I said, where is that?" And we had a chance to go through Saskatchewan, looked at different things, and at that time there were all kinds of farms for sale. So we ventured out by faith and got a farm near Edgeley, Saskatchewan, a little bit northeast of Regina, and we grew that farm to about 6,500 acres of wheat, canola, and peas, all in zero-till, conventional, but always trying to see how we could do better. In my early years in France, I had an interest in how to increase organic matter and these different things. And so yeah, in Saskatchewan, we tried our best with different things. But in 2018, a little bit of maybe a midlife crisis or whatever you may call it, we had the chance to sell our farm and to buy this farm here in Montana. And so in 2019, we bought the place in July, and with the crop, and that year we harvested a crop in Saskatchewan and one in Montana. That was an interesting time. We So with that, I wanted to give you. I'm going to give you a little more of a description of the farm, but I wanted to give that to you under the 6 principles of regenerative agriculture. So I'm going to be going one by one and try to describe how I'm applying it to our context. So the first one being context. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know of these, but I just wanted to just go a little bit toward that. And so know your context, minimize soil disturbance, maintain a living root, keep the soil covered, integrate livestock, and then encourage biodiversity. So the first one, know your context. And so our context is so we have so the description said 15,000 acres. We've actually dropped some rented land that was that just wasn't very good, and just was out and was subject to a fair bit of development in the area. So we've actually refocused close by, but we're 11,400 acres of mainly silt loam with some sandy clay. It's a fairly deep loam. It can be 3-4 feet, except on we have quite a bit of topography over the farm, and some of the higher areas, little knolls, can be somewhat rocky. We've got organic matter of 2% when we started in 2019, and we grow these crops: spring wheat, winter wheat, canola, chickpeas, flax, mustard, yellow peas, safflower, buckwheat, lentils, and we always try different things to see how to make it work in our rotation. Um, our, uh, our rainfall is 11.66 inches. That's kind of an average since 2011. 8.6 inches come in rain, and about 3.1 the equivalent of rain in snow. Um, Historically, this land was farmed half wheat with a potential of about 50 bushel an acre, and half fallow. So wheat fallow has been done for a long time in this area. So when I give you this crop list above there, it's highly unusual. And when we bought the farm, they had just transitioned it to 2/3 crop being wheat and chickpeas, and a third fallow in rotation. So this dry climate, I mean, 8.6 inches is not very much. In Saskatchewan, we were probably closer to 12 inches of rain, 11 inches on average, and that makes a huge difference in what you can do from one year to the next. So we have to be even though Saskatchewan, we always said, was dry, we have to even be more conscious about that. And when I'm saying wheat fallow, I guess this is an aerial map of Teton County in Montana, probably in the middle of June or July, and you see just wheat and fallow. So that has been done for decades, and that has actually cropped some challenges. And when so our farm prior in has always been wheat fallow up until, like I said, 2018, and in 19 we brought in a fair bit of diversity. But here's a bit of a video, and forgive me for the kind of motion sickness here, but this is some of the challenges we have. Is it's a fairly deep loam, not a very high topsoil, but it's very platy, fair bit of compaction. And I think that's the legacy of years of first work summer fallow, and then chem fallow since the mid 90s. And you see this brown line there. These are roots from previous years. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of a difference, but it's really the challenge we're trying to address, because it doesn't rain a lot, but when it falls, it doesn't always want to go in the ground. And the porosity is not great. The gas exchange, the air exchange is not great. And so we're definitely, these are, I mean, this probably is my main challenge, is trying to form aggregates. So our goals is to implement mostly continuous cropping, phase out the synthetic fertilizers by 2026, increase organic matter from 2 to 3% by 2032. So that was a goal we put in 2022. So 10 years to accomplish 1 extra percent. And our yield goal is about 35 bushel an acre of wheat. So basically 2 times 35 was 70 bushel over 2 years, where it was 50 bushel every other years in the old system. And when I say the old system, is what my neighbors practice. Basically, it's a lot of wheat fallow. And basically continuing to implement regenerative agriculture, trying to implement the 6 principles to our context, or the 5 principles to our context. So the first one from a soil standpoint is minimize soil disturbance. So No-till for us is probably the easiest thing compared to anywhere else because of our dry environment. We have to do it because it's a way to conserve moisture. We're aiming to eliminate insecticide and fungicide seed treatment, and basically we've pretty much done that already. Reducing the use of fertilizer of herbicides, planning to phase out of synthetic fertilizers. And so this is our seeding rig, which is a disc drill converted to K-heart openers. And this was seeding lentils into stubble, wheat stubble. Yes, I mean, I'm sure that's not so foreign to you guys, but that's the equipment we use. You see the liquid tanks on the tractor, or that's for the biology we apply with the seed, and the back being lentils. That was lentil seed. So yeah, seed treatments. We've replaced chemical seed treatments, being insecticide and fungicide, with biologicals. That had started sometime in 2020, but we're now pretty much completely with biologicals, compost extracts, some biostimulants, and we've used some Bavaria bassiana against wireworms and cutworms, which are our main challenges. So it's kind of the catch-22. So here's a bit of a video showing how we treat directly into the auger. And so yeah, basically that's our tub where we mix that. And the video here is some of that endo shield. That's that Bavaria bassiana that we're adding to that, and treating wheat into a grain cart to have a way to have scales to be able to rate it right away. I was saying it's a catch-22 with wire worms and cutworms. Since this land had been in fairly high chemical stuff, it's now trying to rebuild the biological part to try to have a system that fights against the main pest. They will always be there, but just so we can get them in smaller population. So we are aiming to eliminate insecticides and fungicides in crop as well, which we're pretty much there by increasing the Brix levels to the total dissolved solids in the stem, mainly sugars, and trying to increase the Brix levels by bringing more biological products, homemade products, and trying to favor for a better environment in the root zone and on the leaves as well. So here's a chart that when I got introduced to it, I was all excited because I felt like, okay, we're going to increase the sugar in our plants. Life is going to be great. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with this chart, but basically at the top, it shows from 1 to 20 being the Brix levels. And as you go up, the small insects like aphids and sucking insects, chewing insects, and grasshoppers have a hard time metabolizing sugar. So the most sugar there is in a plant, and the harder it is for them to metabolize it. So either they will die trying, or they will go to another crop which has a lower Brix level. And the bigger the insect, and the more it can metabolize the sugar. So the catch-22 is also on that side is as soon as you get to that, to that 13, 14 level, you have less of a chance to have insect pressure. But now you also have a crop that's a whole lot more delicious to deer and whatever big pests that are attracted to sugar. So when I saw this chart, I was all excited, but it's just it's like anything. It's always easier said than done, but that's somewhat the background of what we're trying to do. Reduction of herbicides. So basically, it's quit seeking eradication of weeds, because we were sold the line when it comes to conventional agriculture. We will never eradicate weeds. Weeds are always, there's a seed bank, and they are there waiting for the right condition to show up. And actually, our past high intensity of synthetics provided the best environment for weeds to actually for the weeds we have to grow. So when we shift the biological spectrum, well, we will shift to different weeds, no doubt. But we're definitely, by trying to seek eradication, we're overusing chemicals that that probably are not that economic threshold. So yeah, that's one part where we're not trying to look for just a very clean field, but at least to be at economic threshold. Use better quality water, maybe even an RO system. Know the best pH for different products for efficacy, so we can use less. And then use adjuvants that increase the efficacy as well, but also start the breakdown of the active ingredients much quicker by the biology. So, for example, fulvic acid has been known to penetrate the leaves better for these products, but also once it's in on the ground, it tends to help with the deterioration of that active ingredient. And all that in a goal to make sure that the active ingredient doesn't stick around very long, and that that the biology is preserved and enhanced. So how do we phase out of fertilizers? And I guess I feel, even with the chemical part, when I talk to some organic producers, they're saying, you're saying like, oh yeah, well, we've done that a long time, maybe. But is it even possible from a conventional standpoint? Can we do? I mean, that's some of the things, I've been asking myself, will our crops become worse and worse? And I'm sure you can answer that question quicker than I am. And but yeah, these are the questions. Are we going to mine the ground? That's always what we've been told. Whatever we're taking off the land, well, we should be putting it back. And should we? Or so a 40 bushel crop of wheat removes about 19 pounds of an acre of phosphate. All right, these are numbers out there. So when you look at a soil test, and you see an organic matter level of 2.1%, and we've got 29 ppm of phosphate, soluble phosphate in the ground, which is not a bad level, and that age is maybe that's a few years old. This sample, but still 29 pounds. Basically, when you look at I said we were using 19 pounds of phosphate. If that was true and I wasn't putting fertilizer, I would have only 2 years worth of phosphate in the ground. And that's kind of what we've been somewhat, I would say, brainwashed. So we got to put more, right? I mean, otherwise we're not going to grow anything. I just remember when I was a kid, there was a neighbor in France where he was going to retire, and the neighbor said, "Oh, he's not gonna put phosphate and potash anymore. He's just gonna grow his crop with just fertilizer, with nitrogen." And people said, "Oh, it's gonna be horrible. It's not gonna work." And then he grew 4 or 5 years of crops with just nitrogen, and they were just fine. And now you wonder, well, what kind of bank account is that you can keep drawing on, except for the U.S. Treasury? It seems can do that, or even the Canadian Treasury, I guess. But yeah, so like these are some of the questions I always ask myself. And so can we phase out of fertilizer? Well, the first encouragement that I got was to do a total nutrient digestion analysis, which takes in account just the minerals of the soil from basically anything that's in the clay, sand, and loam part. And this is a 6-inch sample from 6 inches deep, and with that, just by focusing on phosphorus, we have 1,080 pounds of phosphorus, not phosphate, available. Not available. I mean, it's there, but we need biology to make that available to the plants. And nature is made in such a way that actually any soluble fertilizer that's put on is trying to not leach it out. So it puts it back into the immobilized version that you see right there. So it's actually incredible. If you took the value of the land, and keep in mind, this is just 6 inches, and you took that value into fertilizer, possibly the value of the land, especially here, would just be as astronomical compared to its market value. So it's incredible what's there. And that test gave me, say, more courage to say, hey, well, maybe we are mining the ground. I'll come to that a little bit later, but there's a lot of nutrient there. It's just like saying there's nothing to eat in the house, and you open the pantry and you just say, oh, we got all this, we just have to cook, and then we can make a meal, then we'll have something to eat. So we're just looking for the cooks. So with 1,080 pounds an acre, and considering on 6 inches and considering 4 feet, we've got about 450 years of phosphate. And considering that above every acre of land, there's 32,000 tons of nitrogen, we just need the biology to make it available. And I would say, some people will say, yeah, you're mining the ground, but how does it make it better to go mine it in Florida or Algeria, Morocco, or what? I mean, at some point, these deposits are going to run out, and we're going to have to figure out a way to recycle these nutrients. And so I think that's something we have to pay attention to a whole lot more. We've been, as far from a just fertilizer efficiency standpoint, we've really reduced our nitrogen as well, and we're making use of melted urea. And basically, it's putting urea in suspension or in solution in water, and by using it with some trace elements on the crop, and with that, we basically, compared to soil applied nitrogen, it's about 4 times more efficient. So with that, we are still encouraging the root development, because foliar feeding does actually encourages more root development. So the results, well, the chemical seed treatments have been replaced by biologicals. P&K, phosphate, and potash have been eliminated since 2022. Nitrogen is actually we're lowered by 75%. And that is in a view to eliminate that by 2026, and we're still going to be fluid on seeing if we can do that or not. Herbicides have been lowered by 45%, and insecticides and fungicides are close to eliminated. And in our situation, I will it's not like I will stop. I mean, I feel like if we still have an invasion or something, I will call myself on saying, hey, we made a mistake somewhere and we screwed up. But I will use these tools, but really at last resort, and considering an economic threshold, and probably a fairly high one too. So like that was a question, are we mining the land? And I guess if you look at, I'm gonna, these are some hypotheses, more of a theory that I have when I've been looking at different things. Plants are made of 42 to 47% of carbon, and that's coming from 0.04% of the CO2 in the atmosphere, right? And the soil, like the cycling from the soil. Plants are made from 1 to 5% of nitrogen coming from the soil, but also originally from the air, from the 78% of nitrogen in the air. So in the same way, and I mean, in smaller part yet, plants are made of 0.05% phosphorus, up to 0.5%. So it's coming from the soil, right? I mean, yeah, and it is. So are we mining the land? Yeah, maybe yes. But the thing is, and that's just a hypothesis. I mean, that's when I look at this is smoke from forest fires, and we see that a few times in a year. And then all at once the next day, that's the same view. And we just had maybe a little shower or something. Where did the smoke go? Did just, I would tend to say, like, did it precipitate, and did it actually bring some value of nutrients? I guess maybe I'm pushing it a little bit, but I know some farmers that have not put fertilizers for years, and their soil levels are still kind of the same. So how is that again? How is that for a bank account? And then we see, in the news, we'll see Saharan dust map shows huge plume approaching Texas. And so then kind of see like, hey, is it possible that we could have some of that? Yeah, we're getting some different deposits of different things. So there's a cycling that's happening that's much bigger than us, so we can think about. And so are we actually mining? I don't know. I guess if the tests are showing that we're not, well, that then maybe we're not in the same way. And plus, a lot of the people that are worried about that we're mining the land, definitely they could have, some of these same people can have a terrible problem of erosion with water erosion and different thing, and that's I would say a worse problem. So yeah, next principle, maintain a living root. And so just going through a bit of just quickly the process of photosynthesis, taking solar energy with some carbon from the air, some CO2, some water, and basically it makes glucose and oxygen from the nice solar panel that the leaves are. So yeah, that glucose gets exuded into the root zone. Some carbohydrates, sugars, like we're talking about the bricks test. The more bricks we have and the more sugar is going to be pushed into the ground as well. And that the biology is fed by that, and is actually taking the parent material from I was talking about the 1,080 pounds of phosphorus. That's the mechanism that it takes to actually break down the parent material and make it soluble and give it to the roots. These microorganisms form organic matter, and they create aggregates. These aggregates, this is exactly what I'm looking for in the platiness that I showed in that first video, is to get some porosity. So there's a good gas exchange between the air and the soil. And even with that, I got to here, like our strong pressure, high pressure system and low pressure system are a way for nature to push in gas or air into the ground, whether it's oxygen or carbon or different oxygen to make the biology live. And actually, when you have a low pressure system, it exhales. So our soil is respirating that way. But if it's all compacted and platy, it has a hard time doing that. And then of course the carbon is cycled back in the atmosphere, and it goes back and forth. So really my goal, as I said in the beginning, is to just restore the porosity and the aggregates that are present in nature, in the prairie, in the original prairie, or in the forest. And so when we look at that, you've got like these are two fields side by side, the neighbors and mine on the right, the neighbors on the left. And you see around the roots the amount of soil, and that's basically the presence of the biology that's working with the roots, with the small hair of the roots. And on the other side, being in a chemical system with chemical seed treatment and more nitrogen or more phosphate in the root zone, well, it doesn't have that association, right? So this is a bit later from another field, but we have a pretty good interaction of soil sticking to the root. The rhizosheath is nicely put together. So with that, I mean, living root in the ground, we always hear, well, it's cover crops, right? And I don't dispute that, except for our context with the little bit of water we get. If we do a full season cover crop, we basically take the moisture that we could have used for next year to grow a crop. And then what happens too is that we generally don't have enough moisture to start a cover crop in the fall. So for us, it's been different. We've tried, and unless we had livestock, and livestock is a big part, and it's definitely one of the the principles Regen Ag, and we'd like to implement it more. We have challenges to implement livestock, and I'll go on that a little later. But basically, cover crops have been difficult for us to use in more of a grain operation. So yeah, like we're trying to use roots to do exactly what the photosynthetic process is doing. So and I was telling you, our moisture environment is difficult to even grow a crop every year. So can we continuous crop? How much moisture does it take to grow a crop? And there's one that some stats that I got from Nelson Solberg at a conference a few years ago, and I found this just to be a really neat equation. It takes about 4 inches to grow a crop from in our basically dryland environment, from seed to the reproductive mode to basically having a grain head on. And then every inch produces in wheat 7.5 bushel of an acre of wheat, in canola 5.7 bushel an acre of canola, and 4 bushel an acre of chickpea. So really, when we look at our 12-year rainfall average, that is 8.6 inches, you subtract 4 inches to build the plant. That leaves 4.6 inches to grow grain. And these are the yield potential. So for wheat would be 34 bushel an acre, canola 26, and chickpeas 18. And I know this is very theoretical, so I guess, does it work in the real world? And I'd be interested to know, your experience if you were to take that number. So basically, I look at these years here, like in the last 6-7 years. If we look at the precipitation, so to grow a crop, it takes water from basically August to September to October the year before. And these are the numbers for that. And then I'm not counting any snow number, because sometimes the snow doesn't go in the ground, but also what's happening is we do have to account for like evaporation of some sort. So I mean, it's not an exact science here, but basically we're taking the March to April to July numbers to grow the crop the next year. And that's the potential useful rainfall. So if we look at just the wheat yields, if we take the equation from before, the 4 inches plus the 7.5 bushel per 1 inch of moisture, these are the calculated wheat yields that we should have according to the rainfall we got. And what's interesting on our farm is actually we've come really close to that. And so that's given me some encouragement to see what does it take to do that, to do continuous crop, and that on average, I mean, averages are, as you see, if we said 8.6 inches, well, we've had anywhere from 4.6 inches to 12.64, right? So it seemed like that number is working for us if we're looking for 34, 35 bushel an acre wheat. So and the idea with that, though, to keep a living root in the ground, is by growing a crop every year, we're basically doubling the amount of photosynthesis that are compared to the normal context. It'd be nice to do more, but then it's also difficult if we don't have moisture in the ground. There's plenty of times where we can't grow one thing for a while until we stock up the profile again. So next one is keep sward covered. And why? I mean, kind of going quickly, why? So reducing evaporation, reduce the temperature of the sward to preserve biology, reduce the impact of rainfall and slow down runoff. And that was one that I thought, like, oh, maybe you're pushing a little bit, like the impact of rainfall. But in the middle of summer, you get a quick thunderstorm, and you're outside and it falls on you, and it can be actually in hail form as well. Yeah, no doubt a raindrop can have a fair bit of impact on the ground. So having it covered can mitigate that impact. And it provides food for the microorganisms and reduces soil erosion. So I guess, I'm just maybe saying that tongue in cheek, but does it even have to be a crop, I guess? And just much like you guys, we have a few months of snow in the winter, and during that time, nothing is happening. And we actually, the soil is covered, and a lot of the pests are being put down. So, I mean, sometimes, hey, our context is there that we have our soil covered for at least 4 months out of the year. That's something that Texas doesn't have. So so there's that. We use stripper headers on our combines to keep straw tall, and also it's always spread right because it never went through the combine, so it doesn't have to be spread. With that, it also doesn't need to be chopped, so that's a reduction of 30% in fuel usage. It increased the capacity of the combines for not having all this straw going through. And one of the advantages being straw trap from like the snow trap from the straw, and creates a bit of a microclimate in the spring, and it reduces evaporation. So with that, I mean, this is a flax crop in tall wheat stubble, and in between the rows. And what's nice about that is, yeah, it did catch more snow during the winter, but it provides that microclimate where the wind doesn't have access to the plants and less evaporation. The beauty also is, like, with the disc, you need a disc drill, of course, because otherwise it becomes a mess trying to go through all that straw. But with a disc drill too, this is the wheat the year after, and still keep some of that straw up, and some of it is pushed down, and gives a very nice cover to the ground, so that also that reduces evaporation, and it gives microorganisms something to eat. So yeah, the next principle, integrate livestock, and that's one that actually is probably the hardest one for us on our farm. At one time, there was fence all around the farm, but that has been all taken away. So we've got very little fence and very little access to water. So how do you integrate livestock with that? It's not impossible, but our challenges are higher. And I won't hide that it's not so much in my wheelhouse as well. I'm not as I don't have the skills for that. So we're trying to see how we're going to do that. But yeah, why do we want to integrate livestock? And sure, you've heard of that too in the past. America was the swords that we have were created by huge groups of bison trampling a bunch of the grass. They were surrounded by predators, so they were always staying in packs, and they were moving very quickly. So they were eating some, but they were also leaving a lot, and they were depositing their crap, their cow pies behind. And I mean, this is an acronym that's actually kind of neat, and maybe funny. It's not. I'm not the author of it, but really, soil health improvement tool is what's happened. And over the last 20 years, over the last 100 years, we've reaped the benefit of using the carbon from the ground. With that too, the dung beetles that were also more present back then were able to bring it down into the ground and increase the organic matter and feed the biology. In our infinite wisdom with petrochemicals, well, with like the pour-on insecticides and all this, have taken away a lot of that. So even today, when we've done some cover crops and integrated some livestock from local cattle producers on some of the land where we can do that. And well, when you have a cow like spread all over the place and all they can do is eat a little bit here and a little bit there, we're not having the impact that originally was done by the bison. Plus, these cows had a pour on insecticides, so definitely cow pies were not nearly as good for the biology or for the dung beetles to take them into the ground. So that is something. So far, we're looking for a more of a relationship with a cattle producer that would want to do the more of the regen practices with more intensive type of crowding livestock, different things. So if we don't have livestock or very little, and it's not there, basically we've looked at mimicking the rumen of a cow by making a high quality microbial compost, and we've turned our attention to the Johnson Sioux bioreactor. And some of you are maybe familiar with some of what Dr. Johnson put together, and his original design was more of a cage on the pallet. And since we have access to these 1,000-liter totes, we are actually making use of them to make them as bioreactors. And so this is a bit of a quick video, and it's not super good, but hopefully it gives you an idea. We make holes, drill holes on top with a 1-inch drill bit, and we attach these are air seeder hoses on the top, and then we cut at the right there at where it curves, and take it, flip it upside down, and what it ends up doing is it goes to the bottom of the tote and makes a false floor. These so if you pay attention, there are 5 holes in there, and when it's going, we'll see maybe a little bit better. Hopefully nobody's getting motion sickness here. But yeah, so there's 5 holes, and these are where we put PVC pipes for aeration just before we put the compost in there. And so it makes a false floor, and then the valve at the front is left open for aeration as well. So that way the compost is always about 12 inches from an area of aeration. So we use a sling manure spreader as a mixer, and we mix hay, straw, sawdust, dairy manure, water to 70% humidity. So yeah, like here's, we use our telehandler to do that, and then put some water with a 3-inch hose. We've kind of figured out a way to get to that 70% humidity. Then we mix that for about 20 minutes, and you see now the totes with the PVC pipes in them, and then we cover the top of the PVC pipes so they don't fill up with compost, and then we fill them up right as full as they can be. Then after about 24 to 48 hours, it starts to heat up, and we can pull the PVC pipes. When we pull them, basically it forms a chimney, and you see that in the back there. So these chimneys are staying put that way, and we try to get the compost temperature, and that's a little bit of a game with the makeup of the original mix between hay and dairy manure and sawdust, to try to have the right mix of nitrogen green material with carbon rich material so that it doesn't heat up too much, and also that it heats enough. And the idea of heating is to get rid of the weeds and the pathogens. And so that 150, 160 degrees is where you kind of want to have it at the most, and 140 seems to be the threshold where below that you won't have the same action on the pathogen. As you see, this is probably the thermometer is probably a week or 10 days after the totes have been filled, and already then they've settled by about 10 inches, and some of it is just from the reaction of the heat and carbon that's been depleted. But after 12 months, the compost is ready, and we've kept it, try to keep it at 70% humidity. And you see it's really, this is the same. I mean, we basically have only about a third in volume left, so about 500 pounds per tote. Um, and it makes a texture that's actually kind of pasty. What I forgot to mention is that by the time the on the temperature, by the time we hit 80 degrees Fahrenheit, we put earthworms in there to enhance the process, and that usually happens maybe 4 weeks after the fill of the compost. And so by having these earthworm and having the right moisture, after 12 months, that whole toad will have been digested through earthworms, and earthworms being very good at proliferating the right biology. And what we're looking for is a compost that's high in fungi and has more of the complete nematodes and protozoa and all the other life forms to have that, but also some of the biochemicals to, like the enzymes for fertility. So with that compost we put into tea bags, fairly large tea bags, and we'll use 160 to 200 pounds of into these tea bags. And you see our bubbler there on the side, and basically, so we bubble that. There is a blower on the side of the tank that pushes air through. The bags of compost are into this basket on top, and the water is being mixed through, and basically it's trying to strip the biology of the compost, so it makes a brown liquid that has all the different biology that we're looking to get. That extract is mixed with some fish hydrolysate, some molasses, and also some trace elements like boron. We're fairly low in boron, but we can put some zinc or different things along with that. And it's brought to the field with a tanker. And by the time we put the fish hydrolysate and the molasses, we basically have a max of 12 hours before it starts to just go basically rancid. And it all depends kind of on temperature, but no doubt that 2 minutes after it's made is the best, and like 12 hours after it possibly doesn't have very much. And some people will say it takes less for it to go rancid, and some people will say it takes more. I guess we're trying to hit for the middle and for the practical way to do it. So as it goes into the field, as you see here, so on this John Deere drill, these are K-hard openers, and we drop the liquid right in furrow at 10 gallons an acre. So the last one is enhancing biodiversity. And I was, from the start of the presentation, I was showing that our context has been more wheat and fallow and alternates. And here we are, so we come, 5-6 years ago, and we change everything. We go continuous cropping. We use all these crops here, and some of them we've been doing some work with chickpeas and flax. And that's been, it's one of these things we did for a couple years. We did a fair bit of it, and then we went away because we didn't see the yield advantage. We're going to come back to it, and possibly, as you see in the background, there was a row of flax and a row of chickpeas and alternating. It looks like we may just be mixing them together in the same furrow. But what I like about that, even though we may not see a yield advantage in our dry environment, it basically helps us it just about assures us to not have to use fungicides. And even now, I guess the fungicide we don't want to use, we're going to be using, if we were to look at a fungicide, we're looking at more of a product that has chitosan and yucca, which is so it's a biological product, and it seemed like we've seen good results elsewhere against ascochyta blight. But if we can put the whole system together between intercropping and possibly using the product, if we had a pretty good, if we had good condition for that, we at least would be able to increase, at least preserve our biology. And what I like too about this setup is when we use just chickpeas, we tend to have a high nitrogen environment, and then our cover seems to disappear so much quicker. By having flax in it, our carbon to nitrogen ratio is increased, and then we don't have nearly the decomposition. And I know in Western Canada, some people are doing some of the chickpeas and flax. And yeah, this is kind of what we get, in the combine. It's a little bit finicky to set the combine. It's not too bad. It works, but this is how we sort through. And it's definitely, I mean, more work. It's a whole lot easier to harvest a field of flax and then harvest a field of chickpeas. And so here's our chickpea flax mix. Flax goes here, chickpeas go there, screenings go here, and it works pretty good. But it's it's definitely extra work as well. Nothing like seeing a field of so this would have been winter canola, but even mustard. And again, in Western Canada, you see a lot of that, but over here there's so little of it that we're along a main highway, and we had a field of mustard last year right along the highway, and people were stopping by and saying like, this is amazing, we've never seen that before, wow, can we take pictures? And so it's kind of neat to have that. We even had some people say, did you really want these flowers? Is that by intent you wanted this? Or so it's interesting to see what happens. How do we measure progress? And like all these things, in some ways we can go into it and thinking like, it's all nice to try to think we're going to change the world, but still you want to have some reassurance on what you can do, because we still have to pay the bills at the end. And some of that, I mean, for an interest of trying to capture the moisture, the little bit of moisture that falls from the sky, we want to make sure that we're infiltrating that. And these were some of the tests with the infiltration ring, where the first inch was going in touch over 2 minutes. And then the second inch in 20 minutes, that gives us an average of 14.8 inches an hour. And yeah, when we get that, possibly that 2-inch thunderstorm in the summer that falls in 15 minutes, we want to make sure that it goes into the ground and that it infiltrates, that we have enough cover to just guide it through the ground. So that's one thing that seemed to have worked out. The organic matter from 2019 at 2%, our same field this past year was at 2.6%, which it seemed like we'd be on track to hit 3% by 2032. At this point, I mean, at least it's going in the right direction, and that's encouraging. And the yields have been on target with proportional to the rainfall, as what I was showing before. So I guess so far it seemed like we're kind of at least hitting some of the goals. So one of the things that we use to give us a little bit of peace of mind during the growing season, because here we are in January with all these great ideas we gather from conferences. We're going to do this and we're going to do that, and then the rubber meets the road sometime in April, and you start to second guess yourself. And for us, the fact that we're doing plant sap analysis has given us some peace of mind, or at least a way to check if the things that we're doing are working, and possibly to if it wasn't right, to get something on either foliar or with some maybe some nitrogen or something. And so far it seemed like we've done okay. And I was telling you about our problems with boron, and basically all our saps were like, probably out of 100 sap tests, the boron part has been low on 98 of them. So that's something we're trying to address by using a little bit of boron in any application that can go over the land. But overall, I mean, this we've had some decent sap tests coming back, so that's encouraging. Some of the soil tests that we use um, are the total. So I was showing you the total nutrition digestion test, and that was definitely a big encouragement. The Haney test for respiration. Our respiration, for some reason, hasn't been all as good as we would like, and it's taking longer to actually increase. The PFLA, like actually the diversity of microbiology, seems to be actually going the right direction, actually better than average in most part. We use microscopy for we have somebody that is pretty good at decent with decent rates to take a sample under the microscope, and that also gives a little bit of peace of mind. But really, I mean, and that's funny. I'm going back to this. So these are the tests. When I was starting to look into regenerative ag, I wanted to have hard numbers. I wanted to know, people were saying, well, you can feel the dirt and all this, and I was kind of pushing that outright, saying like, well, no, I want hard numbers. But really, what it is that I now go to the field with a shovel anytime I get a chance, and it's the shovel, the feel, the nose test. That's really what tells you what's going on, and so it's the constant observation is the key, and it really is a skill that needs to be developed, and it's I just with that you're probably, I guess for me, I feel like I'm about 60 to 70% of what I need to know by just using a shovel. Earthworms are appearing. Our farm was basically devoid of any earthworms in and now, well, it's slow in some areas. Still you can't find any, but we have areas where now we find them, and so that's been pretty neat. I don't know if you guys struggle with sawfly, but because of so much wheat and fallow over the years, sawfly has been a huge problem. And this individual here, Dave Weaver, is from MSU, Montana State University, and he studied sawfly his whole career. And we were trying to see how do we do something, because there's no treatment, no insecticides, really, there's nothing you can do against it. And Brachycephalus is basically a beneficial predator of sawfly, and we're starting to see more of them as well. And the stripper header is an advantage because that wasp is finding it's basically finding its way into these little holes that you see there, and they lay eggs into the sawfly larva, and that way the sawfly larva is actually taken care of. But the tall straw makes it that the wasp can actually be it can actually survive. So these are some of the things that, yeah, even though we can't use chemical, well, there are ways to benefit some of the predators. So, with that, I guess, do we have it figured out? And, we don't. No, we have a lot to learn yet, and that's what's exciting. Still, we're making some constant improvement, trying to find ways to make things work. Yeah, we're seeing different interesting things. I think we're on the right track. And to me, it's been more fulfilling to work with nature and to work with nature in the way that God created it. And I'm amazed by all the things I was passing by before that I just didn't want to look at, and now they seem to all make sense together. So it's been trying to use all the tools necessary in the toolbox for me to be a steward of the land, and that's been definitely a nice change. Some of these links are some of the things that have encouraged me over time, over the past, and definitely going to conferences. I was at the Acres conference there a couple months ago, and just YouTubes and podcasts. John Kempf has just been amazing as far as trying to figure out, and even when you listen to a podcast that deals with almonds, or an orchard somewhere which has hardly anything to do with my dryland farm, there's always something that some kind of aha moment that seemed to say, hey, I wonder about this. And so we constantly have to be kind of repeat things and look at things under a different light. And so these people have been huge encouragement.